It was a lazy Sunday afternoon in the small town of Oakville, the kind of place where nothing much ever happened. The streets were quiet, with only a few people strolling past the old library and the cozy corner cafe where Emma and Mia sat, sipping iced coffee. The air smelled of fresh pastries and the faint scent of rain, even though the sun was shining brightly outside. Emma stared out the window, watching cars slowly drive by. Her mind felt heavy, as it had been for weeks. College had started to feel like a blur of endless classes and assignments. She wasn't even sure why she was studying business anymore. Is this really what I want? She thought to herself for the 100th time. Mia sat across from her, tapping her fingers nervously on the table. She had a sketchbook open in front of her, but it was empty. I don't know what's wrong with me, Mia sighed, breaking the silence. I haven't been able to draw anything for days. I look at the paper, and it's like all my ideas just disappear. Emma glanced at her best friend. Mia's long dark hair was tied up in a messy bun, and her eyes, usually full of excitement and creativity, looked tired. Mia was an artist. Everyone in Oakville knew that. Her paintings of dreamy landscapes and abstract emotions had always impressed people, but lately she had been struggling with self-doubt. She constantly questioned if her work was any good, if she could really make a career out of it. I get it, Emma said, her voice soft. I don't even know why I'm in college anymore. I thought I wanted to study business, but now I'm just confused. She sighed, taking a long sip of her iced coffee. I feel stuck. Mia nodded slowly, her eyes distant. Me too. It's like we're not really living, just going through the motions. For a while, neither of them spoke. The cafe buzzed with quiet conversations and the sound of cups clinking, but it felt as if they were in their own little bubble of uncertainty. Emma twirled her straw absent-mindedly, lost in thought. Then an idea began to form, like a small spark in the back of her mind. What if... Emma started, hesitating for a moment. She glanced at Mia, who raised an eyebrow, curious. What if we took a break? You know, just for a while. From everything. Mia tilted her head. What do you mean? Like, leave town? Yeah, Emma's voice grew more animated as the idea took shape. Why not? We're young. We have time. Why not go on a road trip? See new places. Meet new people. Maybe we'll find some clarity. You could get inspiration for your art, and I could, I don't know, figure out what I really want to do with my life. Mia's eyes lit up for the first time in days. A road trip? Across the country? She leaned forward, her excitement building. That sounds amazing. Where would we go? Emma smiled. The West Coast. California, maybe. We could see the beaches, visit art galleries, explore the cities. We could just drive and see where the road takes us. Mia's mind raced. The thought of leaving Oakville, of seeing the world outside their little town, filled her with a sense of possibility. But what about money and our families? We'll figure it out, Emma replied, her tone confident now. We've got some savings, and we can always call home if we need help. Our families will understand. It's not like we're leaving forever. We just need a break. Mia sat back in her chair, a smile spreading across her face. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of excitement, a spark of adventure. You know what? Let's do it. Let's just go. Maybe we'll find what we're looking for out there. Emma grinned, feeling a surge of relief. Yes, let's leave tomorrow. No more waiting. The rest of the day passed in a blur as they made plans. They gathered maps, packed their bags, and said their goodbyes. Their families were surprised but supportive, understanding that both girls needed some time away. The next morning, just as the sun began to rise, Emma and Mia stood by the car. their hearts racing with a mixture of excitement and nerves. The air was cool, and the road stretched out ahead of them like a promise of something new. As they climbed into the car, Emma glanced at Mia. "Ready?" Mia smiled, her eyes bright with anticipation. "Ready." And with that, they drove off, leaving Oakville behind and heading into the unknown, chasing the horizon in search of inspiration and clarity. The sun was barely above the horizon as Emma and Mia left Oakville behind. The car hummed steadily on the highway, the gentle sound of tires against the pavement, a rhythm that matched the excitement buzzing between them. They hadn't planned much, except to head west, letting the open road guide them wherever it wanted. "Can you believe we're actually doing this?" Mia asked, leaning her head against the window. The early morning light flickered through the trees, casting shadows on her face. She looked relaxed for the first time in weeks. Emma grinned, her hands steady on the steering wheel. "Honestly, no. But it feels good, doesn't it? Like we're finally taking control of our own lives." Mia nodded, watching as the small towns passed by. Each one looked similar: quiet streets, old brick buildings, and signs for diners that promised the best pie in the state. But there was something comforting about the simplicity. It felt like they were moving at just the right pace, not too fast, not too slow. As they traveled deeper into the countryside, the landscape began to change. The trees thinned out, giving way to wide open fields, golden in the afternoon sun. In the distance, rolling hills seemed to stretch forever, making the world feel bigger than they had ever imagined. They stopped for lunch in a small town called Meadow Ridge. The town's only diner, Sonny's Cafe, sat at the edge of the main street, its neon sign buzzing faintly in the warm air. Inside, the smell of fresh pancakes and bacon filled the room, and a few locals sat at the counter, chatting with the waitress. Mia stretched her arms as they took a seat by the window. "This is so different from Oakville. It's like everyone here has their own story." The waitress, an older woman with a kind smile, approached them. "What can I get for you girls?" After they ordered, a man sitting at the counter turned toward them. He looked to be in his mid-40s, with a sun-weathered face and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. "Y'all on a road trip?" he asked, his southern drawl thick but friendly. Emma nodded. "Yeah, we're heading west, just seeing where the road takes us." The man chuckled. "That's the way to do it. I used to be just like you two. Spent my younger years traveling the country, chasing dreams." Mia's curiosity sparked. "Did you find what you were looking for?" He shrugged, taking a sip of his coffee. "Not exactly what I thought I was looking for, but I found peace in the journey itself. Sometimes that's enough." Emma exchanged a glance with Mia. The man's words stuck with them as they ate their lunch, and when they got back on the road, a quietness settled between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, but reflective. They had set out hoping to find clarity, but what if clarity wasn't something you could find so easily? As the afternoon turned into evening, they found themselves driving through a valley, the mountains looming in the distance like giant guardians of the land. The sky turned a soft pink, then a deeper purple, as the sun dipped below the horizon. They pulled over at a scenic overlook to watch the sunset. The world below them seemed endless, fields of gold, distant rivers glinting in the fading light, and the mountains towering like silent witnesses. Mia leaned against the railing, her gaze distant. "Do you ever wonder if we're doing the right thing?" Emma joined her, folding her arms across her chest. "All the time. I mean, we left everything behind. What if we don't find what we're looking for? What if we just get lost?" Mia sighed. I guess that's part of the risk, isn't it? Not knowing, but maybe that's okay." For a moment, they stood in silence, listening to the wind whisper through the trees. The air felt different up here, cleaner, freer. It made the world below seem so small, their worries even smaller. That night, they checked into a tiny roadside motel. The room smelled faintly of pine and old carpet, but it was cozy in its own way. They sat on their beds, flipping through the TV channels, neither of them really paying attention to the screen. The day's conversations lingered in their minds. "Do you think we'll find it?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mia turned her head to look at her friend. "Find what?" "I don't know. The thing we're looking for, clarity, purpose, whatever it is." Mia smiled faintly. "I think we will. But maybe it's not something we find all at once. Maybe it's little pieces we pick up along the way." Emma thought about the man in the diner and his words. The journey itself is enough. It was a comforting thought, even if it didn't provide all the answers. As they lay in their beds, the soft hum of the highway outside lulled them to sleep. The road stretched ahead, full of unknowns, but also possibilities. Tomorrow, they would wake up and continue forward, not sure of where they were going, but trusting that they were heading in the right direction. A week into the trip, the endless excitement of the open road began to wear off. The further west they went, the more the small towns gave way to sprawling cities, each one louder, busier, and more overwhelming than the last. Their car, which had been running smoothly at first, now sputtered and groaned whenever they hit the highway, and worst of all, their money was quickly disappearing. They had arrived in a big city, one that, at first, seemed like the perfect place to explore. The skyline was impressive, filled with gleaming glass towers that reached toward the sky. The streets were alive with people, taxis honking, and the hum of city life buzzing around them. But after just one day of expensive meals, parking fees, and surprise expenses, their budget was stretched thin. "Emma, I'm serious. We can't keep spending like this," Mia said, staring at the receipt from their latest meal. She was sitting in the passenger seat of their car, which was parked near a row of shiny high-rises. The city felt claustrophobic after days of open landscapes, and her nerves were on edge. I know, Emma replied, though her frustration was starting to show. She rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "But we'll figure it out. We just need to get out of the city, maybe find a cheaper place to stay for a night or two." Mia frowned. "But we barely have enough money for gas to get out of here. What if we run out of money before we even reach the West Coast?" Emma exhaled, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. "Then we'll find a way to make it work. We can't just give up now." Before Mia could respond, the car made a horrible sound, a deep grinding noise that made both of them freeze. "What was that?" Mia asked, her eyes wide. Emma glanced at the dashboard. The temperature gauge was climbing rapidly. "Oh no," she muttered, pulling the car to the side of the road as the engine sputtered and stalled. The car went silent, and for a moment so did they. Mia threw up her hands. "Are you kidding me? Now the car's broken down. How are we supposed to afford repairs?" Emma stared at the dashboard, her mind racing. "I don't know, Mia. I'm trying to figure it out, okay?" The tension between them crackled in the air, and Mia leaned back in her seat, crossing her arms. This whole trip was a mistake. Emma shot her a look. "What are you talking about? You wanted this as much as I did." "Yeah, but I didn't think it would be like this. I didn't think we'd be stranded in the middle of some city with no money and a broken car. So what? You want to go back home? Just give up?" Mia turned toward her, her face flushed with frustration. "Maybe I do. At least at home, I wouldn't feel like a failure. I can't even make a decent drawing, Emma. What makes me think I can handle all of this? I'm not cut out for it." Emma's heart sank. She hadn't expected Mia to react this way, and the words stung more than she cared to admit. You're not a failure, and we're not giving up just because things are hard. Mia shook her head. Maybe you can handle this, but I can't. I'm not as strong as you. The silence that followed felt heavier than the broken car and the weight of their financial problems combined. Emma stared out the window, trying to calm herself down, but it was hard. She understood that Mia was scared, but she couldn't shake the feeling that giving up now would be worse than any challenge they faced. We've come this far, Mia, Emma said, quietly, breaking the silence. We can't just turn back now. Mia didn't respond. She kept her gaze fixed on the window, watching people walk by, living their normal lives, while she felt like her whole world was unraveling. Hours passed as they waited for a tow truck to arrive. The city grew darker, streetlights flickering on one by one. When the mechanic finally came and took a look at their car, his face told them everything they needed to know before he even spoke. You're looking at a pretty expensive repair, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. It's the radiator. It's going to cost you a few $100 at least. Emma bit her lip, her heart sinking further. We don't have that kind of money, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The mechanic sighed. Well, I can take it to the shop, but it won't be cheap. You might want to think about cutting your losses. After he left, the silence between Emma and Mia grew even more unbearable. The weight of everything, the broken car, the money problems, their fraying friendship, felt like too much to handle. Emma sat on the curb, her head in her hands, trying to figure out what to do next. Mia joined her, sitting down slowly, her voice softer this time. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to make it worse. I'm scared. Emma nodded without looking up. Me too. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The sounds of the city filled the air, the distant hum of traffic, people laughing as they walked by, the occasional honking of horns. It was so different from the peace they had found in the countryside, and yet it felt like they had been building up to this moment all along. We'll figure it out, Emma finally said, her voice steady but tired. Maybe we'll have to stay here a few days, find a way to earn some money. It won't be easy, but we can't let this be the end. Mia nodded, though her expression remained uncertain. I just don't want to feel like I'm holding you back. Emma turned to her, her eyes softening. You're not holding me back, Mia. We're in this together. We'll figure it out, and we'll keep going. As the night grew colder, the tension between them began to thaw. There were no easy solutions, no quick fixes, but at least they had each other. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to keep them moving forward. The days following their car breakdown were difficult. Emma and Mia found a cheap motel in a rundown part of the city, sharing a small, stuffy room with barely enough space to stretch out. They had managed to scrape together enough money by selling a few of Mia's older drawings and doing odd jobs, cleaning dishes at a diner, passing out flyers on street corners. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept them afloat. The frustration and tension between them had eased a little, though there was still a lingering heaviness. At night, they lay awake in their twin beds, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had gotten so hard so quickly. But there was also a quiet resolve growing between them, something unspoken but felt deeply. One afternoon, as they sat on the hood of their newly repaired car, watching the sun set over the distant skyline, Emma broke the silence. You know, I've been thinking, she said, her voice low. Maybe this whole trip, maybe it's supposed to be hard, like the struggles are part of the point. Mia turned to look at her, surprised. What do you mean? Emma sighed, pulling her knees to her chest. I don't know. It's just, When we started this, I thought it was going to be this fun, easy adventure. But the more we've struggled, the more I've realized that maybe that's the point. Maybe we need to go through the tough stuff to really figure out what we're made of." Mia was quiet for a moment, watching the sky turn from orange to pink. "Yeah," she said softly. "I guess you're right. I keep expecting everything to be perfect, but life isn't like that. Maybe I've been avoiding the hard stuff for too long." Emma glanced over at her friend. "We've both been avoiding things. I think we're growing because of it, though. We're learning how to face things head on." Mia nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe it's not about finding answers right away. Maybe it's about learning how to deal with the questions." For the first time in days, a sense of calm settled between them. The storm that had been brewing, the doubts, the fears, seemed to finally clear, leaving behind a quiet understanding. They didn't have everything figured out, but maybe that was okay. The next day, they left the city behind, their spirits lifted as they drove toward the coast. The sky opened up as they left the crowded streets for wide stretches of road, the sea breeze carrying the smell of salt water. It felt like a new beginning. They arrived in a small coastal town just as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the beach. The town itself was charming, with colorful houses lining the streets and small shops selling handmade crafts. It was peaceful, the kind of place where time seemed to move a little slower. Mia was immediately drawn to the town's art district. As they wandered through narrow streets filled with art galleries, Mia's eyes lit up with excitement. She hadn't picked up a pencil or brush in days, but something about this place reignited her creative spark. "Emma, look." Mia pointed to a small gallery tucked away at the corner of the street. Inside, the walls were covered in paintings that reminded her of her own style, dreamy, abstract landscapes that seemed to capture emotions more than places. Without hesitation, they went inside. The owner, a kind woman in her 50s named Margaret, greeted them with a warm smile. She had a gentle demeanor, and her eyes sparkled with a love for art. As they talked, Mia mentioned her own passion for painting, and after some encouragement from Emma, she showed Margaret a few photos of her work on her phone. Margaret studied the images for a long moment, then looked up at Mia with a smile. "You have a real gift," she said. "Your work has a lot of emotion in it. Have you ever thought about showcasing it?" Mia blinked, surprised. I didn't think it was good enough." Margaret shook her head. "You need to give yourself more credit. Talent like this should be shared. If you're interested, I'd love to feature some of your pieces in the gallery." Mia's heart raced. She had never imagined her work being in an actual gallery, and here was someone who believed in her, someone who saw the potential she had struggled to see in herself. I'd love that," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper, a smile breaking across her face. As they left the gallery, Mia's excitement was palpable. She hadn't felt this inspired in months. The weight she had been carrying, the self-doubt, the fear of failure, seemed to lift, replaced by a new sense of purpose. Meanwhile, Emma found her own breakthrough in an unexpected place. After exploring the town for a while, she wandered into a local bookstore. Inside, a man in his early 60s, with salt and pepper hair and glasses perched on the edge of his nose, was giving a lecture on career choices and life paths. Intrigued, Emma sat down at the back of the small crowd, listening as the man, Professor Andrew, as he introduced himself, spoke about the pressures young people face to choose the right career. His words struck a chord with her. "Life isn't about finding one path and sticking to it forever," he said. "It's about exploring, trying different things, and discovering who you are along the way. Don't be afraid to change direction if something no longer feels right. After the lecture, Emma approached him, thanking him for his words. They talked for a while, and Emma opened up about her uncertainty with her business degree. Professor Andrew listened carefully and offered her advice that resonated deeply. "Don't box yourself in," he said with a smile. "You're still young. You don't need all the answers right now. Just focus on what excites you, and the rest will follow." Emma left the bookstore feeling lighter, as if a huge burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She realized that she didn't need to have everything figured out right away. She could take her time, explore different paths, and trust that she would find her way. That night, as they sat by the beach, listening to the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, Mia turned to Emma, her face glowing with excitement. "I can't believe it. My art is going to be in a gallery." Emma smiled. "I know, and it's just the beginning." "And you?" Mia asked. "How do you feel?" Emma looked out at the horizon, the sea stretching endlessly before them. "I feel free. I don't know what's next, but I'm okay with that." Mia nodded. "Yeah, me too." For the first time since they had left home, they both felt at peace, not because they had found all the answers, but because they had learned to embrace the journey, no matter how uncertain it might be. The road ahead was still long, but now they were ready for whatever it would bring. The Pacific Ocean stretched out before them like a vast, endless canvas, the waves crashing gently against the rocky shore. Emma and Mia stood on the cliffside, the salty breeze tugging at their hair as they gazed out at the horizon. It had been nearly a month since they'd left Oakville, and now, after countless miles, challenges, and revelations, they had finally made it to the West Coast. "Wow," Mia whispered, her eyes wide with awe. "We actually did it. We made it." Emma nodded, smiling softly. "Yeah, we really did." The journey had been far from easy. They had faced breakdowns, both literal and emotional, financial troubles, and doubts that had nearly derailed everything. But standing there, with the ocean stretching endlessly before them, they felt something they hadn't expected: peace. Mia pulled out her sketchbook, which had remained unused for so long, but now seemed alive in her hands. She sat down on a nearby rock, her fingers moving swiftly across the page, capturing the movement of the waves, the light on the water, the feeling of freedom she hadn't felt in months. Emma sat beside her, leaning back on her hands and closing her eyes, letting the warmth of the sun soak into her skin. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight she had carried for so long finally begin to lift. The future was still uncertain, but that uncertainty no longer scared her. In fact, it excited her. As Mia sketched, she glanced over at Emma. "You know, I was thinking about everything we've been through. I thought this trip would give me all the answers, but I'm starting to realize that maybe the answers don't matter as much as I thought." Emma opened her eyes and turned to Mia. "What do you mean?" Mia smiled, her pencil still moving across the page. "I mean, I thought I had to figure out everything, my art, my future. But maybe it's okay not to know. Maybe it's okay to just keep creating and see where it takes me." Emma chuckled. "That sounds familiar. I was so focused on finding the right path for my career, but now I'm realizing that there isn't just one path. We can change, try new things, and that's what makes life interesting." Mia nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I guess we both needed this trip more than we knew, not to find answers, but to remind ourselves that it's okay to not have them." They spent hours on the cliff, talking about their journey and everything they had learned along the way. It wasn't just about the destinations they had reached or the challenges they had overcome. It was about how they had grown, both individually and as friends. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the horizon with shades of orange and pink, they knew it was time to head back home. But this time, they weren't running away from anything. They were heading back with new perspectives, ready to face whatever came next. The drive back to Oakville was filled with laughter and memories. They retraced some of the same roads they had taken at the beginning of their trip, but everything felt different now. The small towns didn't seem as stifling. The long stretches of highway didn't feel as daunting. The road that had once felt uncertain now seemed full of possibility. When they finally pulled into Oakville, the town looked just as it always had. Quiet, familiar, with the same old buildings and streets. But for Emma and Mia, everything had changed. They parked the car in front of the cafe where their journey had begun, and for a moment they just sat there, taking it all in. "Feels weird, doesn't it?" Mia said with a grin. "Being back here after everything." Emma nodded. "Yeah, but in a good way." They got out of the car and walked down the street, past the shops they had seen 1,000 times before. This time, though, they noticed things they had never paid attention to. Little details in the windows, the way the trees lined the sidewalks, the warmth of the evening light. As they walked past the library, Mia turned to Emma, her face serious but soft. "You know, this trip wasn't just about finding ourselves, was it? It was about realizing how much we've grown together. You've always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Emma smiled, her heart full. "Same goes for you. I don't think I could have done this without you by my side." They stopped in front of the cafe where it had all started. The same tables were outside, the same smell of coffee and pastries filling the air. It felt both strange and comforting to be back, knowing that they were different now, stronger, braver, more open to the unknown. "I guess this is it," Mia said with a soft laugh. "The end of our adventure." Emma shook her head. "No, it's just the beginning." They walked into the cafe, sitting at their favorite table by the window. The town outside felt both familiar and new, like they were seeing it for the first time. And in a way, they were. Everything looked clearer now, not because the town had changed, but because they had. As they sipped their coffee and talked about their next steps, there was no pressure to figure everything out all at once. They didn't need to know exactly where life would take them. They just needed to be open to whatever came next. Mia glanced at Emma, her eyes bright with excitement. "What's next for you?" Emma smiled, looking out the window at the world beyond. "I don't know, but whatever it is, I'm ready for it." Mia grinned, pulling out her sketchbook again, her pencil flying across the page. "Same. I can't wait to see where this journey takes us next." And with that, they sat together, watching the sun set over Oakville, knowing that this wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one full of uncertainty, challenges, and endless possibilities. They had found something more valuable than answers. They had found the courage to keep going, no matter where the road would lead.